In this video, we're going to be taking a look at one of the most powerful features of Command, and that is the ability to write Lua scripts that can achieve incredible functionality in a given scenario. So there are two basic ways to get to the Lua scripting depending on what we're trying to do in a given scenario. The first method we can do is go up to the editor and go down to the bottom where it says Lua Script Console. What this will do is give us the ability to test out individual scripts or even run scripts and then save the results depending on what we want to do. Now, the other part of the Lua scripting is once we've developed a script, we have the ability to attach it to an event inside the scenario. To do that, we can go up to Editor, we can do Event Editor, and under Events, under one of our options, we'll go ahead and do a test event for this one. Under Actions, you'll notice that you have the ability to go ahead and create a Lua script, and then we can go ahead and dial in anything we need to happen once a specific event is triggered. With all Lua, this is written in more and more recent versions of Lua, all the standard functions and domains are completely available to us. One of the things that makes it a little bit simpler for us as well is we can actually go ahead and try different elements out and save these as text files later on if we want to use them as other items. Keep in mind as well that you can take an entire Lua file and you can import it directly into a given scenario should you need to do so. For example, in this particular scenario called Downtown, we have the ability to actually take Lua files, generate them externally, and actually import them directly into whatever particular situation we're doing. In this case, we're running a script called developer-mode.lua. Now, if we wanted to actually take a look at developer mode, we've gone into the actual Lua folder for this particular scenario called Downtown. And now, if we were to open it up directly, we'd have the ability to actually take a look at all the different things in here. In this case, I'll grab this one called Game Setup and drag it in. And you can see this is the same type of file, except instead of writing it inside of event action, we have the ability to make that external, and we can go ahead and open it up directly. One of the great uses for this is if there are particular types of settings that you know that you're going to use many times, you can actually create custom functions inside of here and then constantly reuse them in other scenarios by simply grabbing all the different files that you're going to need and opening them up directly into your files. Now, it's worth noting that all these different pieces here is something that you can reuse, which might be critical if you're running the same thing a lot, especially if you're running into a situation where you're importing and exporting external data and you'd like to have some kind of handler to kind of work between the two different pieces. Another thing worth noting is that all Lua functions inside of Command may be different depending on what particular version of Command that you have. Note that all Lua items are completely documented using the Command Lua documentation, which you can find at this website here. This documentation is an absolutely amazing resource, and it often has very good little details that you're going to see inside of it. For example, coming down here, they've given you basic little test scripts that you can run. They even give you the ability to search for a particular item. Now, if we wanted to, well, for example, we'll go ahead and see if there's anything about adding units. If we were to type that in, we'll see one that says scenario add unit. And if we click on it, it'll actually break it down for us so that you can know exactly what the different add unit commands do, as well as what are the different general ideas that you can do with it. Another use that we've seen for Lua inside of Command is the ability to actually create quick battle setup. So if we were to actually go backwards, go back up to Command PE, we can make our way over to the quick battles and actually take a look at what they did with these as well. So in this case, we'll grab this Rolling Thunder one, we'll go ahead and open up this script as well, and you can see that this entire scenario is dynamically generated completely through a Lua script, and all the functions that we have built in here are simply called directly from this HTML form. Okay, with that all out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at what we can do with Lua at the basic level. At the basic level of Lua, and these are things that you're going to run into over and over again, is you have the ability to go ahead and define values that can be used anywhere inside of a scenario. There's two different types of values or variables. You have what they call a local variable, which is going to be limited to that specific script, as well as inside of the context of that script. And you have global variables, which can be accessed at any time. To create a local variable, we simply type in the word local, the name of the variable, and then the value of that variable. Keep in mind, this variable will only be able to be used at this level of scope and not any sort of level of scope that is beyond it. So for example, if we want to set that, and then afterwards we said we want to go ahead and create a for x equals 1 to 10 kind of a thing. And then we want to say local var1 equals 2. In this particular case, we'd run into a situation where these two variables have essentially overwritten each other. Now, if we went ahead and created a local var as the value of 1 and we try to overwrite it, we would run into a context error here. Likewise, if we did something along these lines and we took a local variable and then tried to declare that later on as a global variable, we could run into situations as well. So it's just mindful to be keeping all of your local variables basically located next to each other. Another great advantage to local and global variables is if we declare one, it is now accessible to everything inside this program. So for example, example, if I created this value of var of 1, went ahead and ran this one, and then went ahead and printed the value of it, you'll notice that it still carries the value of 1 because it has been loaded permanently into command's memory for this particular scenario. This is also true if you're running any type of special function that you want to use in different places, because again, you can run out and grab that as long as it was not declared locally. So another thing that we can do that's very, very basic with Lua is we have the ability to go ahead and display information on the screen. Now, as you saw a few moments ago, we used the print command. So for example, if I want to print hello, we can now see it actually print this particular value. Now, if we wanted to go ahead and maybe print the value of a variable real quickly, we can actually combine things and concatenate them inside of the print statement. So for example, if I want to create a local variable, we'll call it 1, and we can say the value of var is, and then we use ... and simply say the word var. So this now gives us the ability to go ahead and display this. Now, if I disable echo and press it run, all we're going to do is get the value of r is 1. So again, it's a very, very useful tool when you're debugging your scripts. Now, print is actually not limited to just variables. You can also create lists using these tools. Now, note lists are going to come up many, 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 many times, and they're also going to be in the form of tables, which are very, very similar. For people who are familiar with Python, they're a little bit like using dictionaries as well. So if I wanted to create a really, really simple list, I could go ahead and say, okay, unit names. And I'll use the left curly bracket to dictate that I'm working within a list or a dictionary. So I could say 1, I'll keep it nice and simple, 2, 3. Note that whenever you're working with any form of lists, they're always going to be inside curly brackets. It is possible to have a list of a list, and we'll run into that situation when we run into some of the functionality pieces later on. So now if I wanted to, I could go ahead and run this scenario, go ahead and print unit names, and now this gives us the ability to see every item inside of this list. Now, from a structural perspective, you're probably looking at that saying, that's very, very difficult to read. Is there a way, if you have 1,000 items, for example, if I wanted to list all the units on one side, I could do that. But this is going to take a little while to actually go ahead and show it all in one messy way. One really slick trick, and we'll take a look at this a little later on too, is we can actually create a loop that goes through each item in the list. So I'll say for KV in iPairs, unit names do. So what this will do is this will iterate through each item inside of a list until it runs out of items inside of that list. So in this case, K is going to be what item number in the list. V is going to be the actual item of the list. So if I wanted to now, I can now print V. Now if I run the scenario, I'll go ahead and I'll clean this out real quick. There we go. We want to knock this one out. So we're not going to come out later on. Go ahead and clean this up. Press run. And you can see now it'll actually print each item in the list. And as we look at iteration later on, you realize how powerful this is. So one final example we'll take a look at is getting all the units on a side, just to show you just how powerful this really can be. So I'm going to go ahead and say units. We'll keep this as a local variable. We don't need to use it anywhere else. Equals. And we'll go ahead and get the command that we're going to need to go ahead and get an entire side. So in this particular case, we're going to be using the get side particular function. If you scroll down here, you'll see one that says get sides. We also have get side and we have get side. The different here is you want to make sure that you use the appropriate one for what you're trying to do. VP get side. Now, all commands that you're going to see are always going to have the same general structure with them. Usually you're going to have a left parenthesis, and then you may or may not have to pass the value of a list into a particular place. So in this case, we'll go ahead and take a look at the documentation just to demonstrate. We'll go ahead and try VP get side. And you can see here that it is going to be looking for a list because it has the curly bracket here. In this case, it wants us to type in a list that looks roughly like this. So I'm going to go type that in, and I'll go ahead and close off the parenthesis on this one as well. And instead of side A, we're actually going to be interested in a side named blue, B-L-U. Make sure you spell it correctly. Now, once we run that, we'll go ahead and see all the different items that comes through here. Now, one of the problems you're going to run into when we're running something like this is the fact that we did not use the correct type of function for the correct type of value that we're using. In this case, we've actually created ourselves an infinite loop because it wasn't the whole side that we needed, it was just the units within the side. Whenever you're working with Lua, it is absolutely critical that you're constantly saving your work. If you run into a situation where you do this and create an infinite loop, it may not be possible to recover the data that you have in the background. In this particular case, this function actually returns everything on that side. So we specifically wanted the units of that side, not everything else that comes along with it. So now that we've clarified this by using .units, we should be able to now get a list of all the different units that we can take a look at. So again, this is just an example of what you can do, but you can see very, very quickly that now we have every single item that we have in the entire side on this side displayed in this nice convenient format. Now, one of the reasons this gets so powerful is now we can take each one of these items and we can actually break them down. But what you're probably noticing is our list here actually has a bunch of items inside of it as well. Each one of these is its own list or a dictionary, like I said, for those of you who are from Python. We can actually break this data down even greater because this is actually a reference to a unit. This is not the actual unit itself, but we'll take a look at that in a later video. Keep in mind, whenever you've completed any work, you can always save it directly to an external file, and we can export it using the technique that we saw a little bit earlier. In our later videos, we'll take a look at the different types of loops that we can do, the different ways we can make it use selection. We can even take a look at creating some functions that we can use later on. We can even go ahead and take a look at references variables, as well as specific commands that are available just inside commands.